Okay. Now, okay. We are now live on YouTube and we are live on Instagram.
Wow. I feel so
Yes,
fancy.
so yes, so welcome, welcome everyone. I am Robert Affinis, and I'm here with a special guest, uh, Melissa Doogie Spires. And I'm excited. We've been following each other for a while now, and this is long overdue. This is a long overdue conversation, and she has much to share with us about her previous experiences with the Seventh Day Adventist, purity culture, and of course her upcoming book. And we will definitely get into that very shortly. So I just want to introduce Melissa. Um, Melissa is an award-winning essayist, screenwriter, and memoirist. Her forthcoming memoir, tentatively titled Holy Disobedience, which explores her upbringing in the Seventh-day Adventist Church and the journey of healing. She advocates for survivors of religious trauma and abuse, using her platform to raise awareness and foster a supportive community through storytelling, public speaking, and social media engagement, specifically TikTok and Instagram, which she help others navigate their own paths to healing. And I'll say I'm a little biased here. I hope that path leads to deconversion. So I'm
Me
just a little
too.
biased with that, right? Right? You know what I
Me
mean?
too.
But everybody has their own journey. So what I want to do is, so everyone that knows, it is customary for me to allow my guests to lead our conversation with a toast. I'm currently sipping on some Apple Crown Royal. And Melissa, what are you sipping on?
Well, as we discussed, sadly, I have a doctor's appointment to go to after this. I would love to be joining you on the Crown. Sadly, I have a little seltzer water.
It's all good. It's all good. You can indulge after you come back from the doctor's
That's
office,
right,
right?
exactly. And you know it.
Okay.
Okay, a toast.
So yeah, so if you could lead us in a toast and let our listeners know what you would like them to get out of our conversation today. So
All
I'll let you go
right.
ahead with that.
Well, I'm gonna preface the toast by saying that I don't know how to give a proper toast because, of course, Seventh day Adventists don't drink. So I never grew up going to weddings where there were toasts or anything. So my first attempt at making one when I was a bridesmaid for someone else I felt spectacularly flat. So I have toast anxiety now. Um, but so I'm going to make my toast very short and sweet. And I'm going to say that I hope, as you just touched on, that our conversation is supportive and healing for everyone, but also leads to deconversion.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I'll say salute to that.
A salute to that. Post.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. So let's dig on in. And everyone, this is going to be a very riveting conversation and very educational as well. Um, so, Melissa, my first question that I have for you. So, your memoir, Holy Disobedience, comes out in May, I believe, of next year,
Yes, yeah,
2026.
May of 2026.
And okay, and it dives deep into the hidden scars of religious trauma. So, what do you hope readers will feel, or even confront in themselves when they close the final page?
I am really hoping, of course, you hope that you can guide people's healing, of course, just like sort of an umbrella thing. But I am hoping that people realize it's never too late to deconstruct. and that it is absolutely necessary work to do, that leaving does not equal healing. Leaving without deconstruction is just going to set you up to repeat the same horrible patterns of behavior, ingrained behavior that you learned in high control religion. You're going to repeat those all your life unless you do some very specific, deep deconstruction work. And I hope in the book that I model how important that is, and that it can come decades after you've left. It's never too late.
Wow, you said wow. You said something very very key there. You said leaving doesn't mean healing.
Yes.
Can you get into a little more of that, right? Because I think a lot of people think that when they deconstruct
Yes.
from societal religiosity, they think, oh, I'm healed, but
Right.
they never realize how, like the book, how the body keeps score, right?
Right.
How a lot of that trauma is still prevalent in them and can come out in different ways.
Yes.
What advice would you have with people that think they're done, right? They deconstructed or they deconverted and they say, okay, I don't believe in this anymore. Let me live the rest of my life. But there's still a lot of work that needs to be done. And did you incur some of that work as well? Or are you still going through that?
Yes, I'm definitely still going through. I think it's a lifetime work, don't you think? It is a lifetime work, and you'll think you've made great strides, and you do. And then there'll be a backslide, or you'll see another corner that, oh my God, I didn't know that I was still channeling that particular, So I think particularly for those of us who left a long time ago, it's important to deconstruct, because back then we didn't even have the verbiage for it. We didn't know that you needed to deconstruct because there was no word for deconstruction. You didn't know too many other people who, now with social media, the wonderful thing about social media is that it's brought all of us together, hashtag deconstruction community,
Yes.
and so those of us who left a long time ago didn't have any of those resources, didn't have any of that vocabulary. And so we really didn't know that we needed to do the work. I hate that phrase because it's so overused, but we really needed to work at deprogramming ourselves. And so I always try to tell people, particularly when you come out of something that's a super high control religion, sort of like Mormons or Adventists that have just a ton of behavioral control as well. Purity culture, obviously a big one for all of us. But like with Adventists, the whole, we didn't drink, we didn't dance, we didn't listen to popular music, we didn't watch television, we didn't watch, movies, so all that stuff. So I tell people, you need to triage, and you need to triage on two different levels. You need to, first of all, or you can do it in either, it doesn't matter, one or two, but in one column, you have to triage where your biggest damage points were and are, and address those first. For some people, it's theological. They just can't get past the belief in hell, or the belief, whatever it is that they really need to work on. For me, it was purity culture. That was where I was really the most messed up. And then in the other column, you have to triage, like, what are you going to catch up on in terms of behavioral stuff? Like, I started drinking, but did I need to do drugs? Not really. I caught up on movies and TV and popular music, but like gambling, I didn't care if I ever learned to gamble, so I didn't care about that, So you have to figure out which parts you're going to catch up on, and you have to figure out where your biggest damage is, and start with the biggest ones, because you don't know how long it's going to take you and how far down the list you're going to get. So.
Absolutely. Very, very well put. Yeah, folks, you still got to do the work after you deconstruct because
Yeah.
it's a daunting task.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Now, what I want to ask you get into is like before discussing the unraveling, so to speak. Can you take us back to a moment from your childhood when the Seventh Day Adventist world felt completely safe, even sacred? And what did it mean to lose that feeling? Did you ever feel safe? Did it ever feel sacred to you? And once you left, how, what type of feelings were constructed when that transpired?
That is such a multi-layered, like I could think about that question forever. I mean, we talked about it, last week, and I've still been thinking about it. Like, did I ever
Mm,
feel safe? What would safety have felt like in the Adventist church? Um, I, I definitely felt special. The Adventists think that they are the only true church, the remnant church, the this and the that. We are just so much better than everyone else type of attitude. I also felt special and kind of safe because my dad was very respected in the church and he was a preacher. And so that all masqueraded as safety. But now that I know true like nervous system safety, like what it feels like for your body and mind to feel, I'm pretty sure there wasn't any in the Adventist church or in our family dynamic, which was so heavily, dominated by the church. Um, so losing the safety wasn't an issue. It was simply learning what safety felt like because
mm,
I didn't know it in that system. And then part of what we were talking about, how if you don't deconstruct and really put in the work, you repeat all the patterns. Then I went from the Adventist high control, unsafe feeling to a series of relationships that also felt unsafe for my nervous system, because I wasn't in control of them or myself. And so learning in my fourth decade what actual safety feels like was a real learning curve. And I think I'm still in it.
wow. Safety. You said something real key. You kind of juxtaposed safety with feeling special in the Seventh Day Adventist Church, right? And wow, that is so nuanced, right? Because I personally feel that most people would rather be quote unquote safe than free, because freedom doesn't necessarily inculcate safety, because there are uncertainties when it comes to freedom. But I
Yeah.
think a lot of times we look at safety as I'm safe in this community because this
Right.
community makes me feel special. But
Right.
that community also exposes psychological trauma. So you can feel safe not even knowing that that safety is actually control. And it is the antithesis for freedom.
Yes. Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Freedom by its very nature is sort of unsafe, right? Because it's open-ended, and so conversely, what you were just saying, so the safety of a high control group is that it's controlled, which is completely not freedom.
Absolutely. I remember the German philosopher and psychologist once said that, that most people don't want to be free. They
Yeah.
want to be safe.
Yep.
And with safety comes control,
Yep. Yeah.
right? With safety comes micromanagement.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think
Total.
most people in the world actually want to be told what to do
Right.
so that they can have a scapegoat to when things fall apart. They can say, it's your fault because
Yeah.
freedom encompasses too much responsibility and
Yes.
accountability for oneself.
Yes. It's absolutely true. And that whole, yeah, just that whole thing, the freedom versus the high control. Um, I think you and I were talking earlier about last week when I was saying that I do a lot of engagement with commenters on social media, and I keep getting these commenters, these very clearly just rabidly Seventh-day Adventists. They're so buried in the cult,
Mhm.
and they're so upset with me, and they end up just well, if you're so anti Seventh Day Adventist and you don't believe in the Bible and you're an atheist, then why don't you just start your own church? And it's like they can't picture freedom of the mind where it's not a church. That's where there's nothing's controlling you, no theology's controlling you. No, I don't need to start my own church. Thank you very much. Like that sounds like hell, actually. But they literally cannot imagine not having something telling them what to do, or that would be a desirable thing, that you wouldn't buy in hook, line, and sinker to a full control, something telling you how to think and do and be and believe. And it's so sad. I just get so sad when I see those comments.
Yeah, I mean that's why I think philosophy should be taught in grade school because
Definitely.
philosophy teaches you how to think
Yeah.
and theology teaches you what to think. It
Yes.
automatically assumes that something is true without investigation. And so that's why people
Absolutely.
just can't fathom
Yep.
freedom, right? It's kind of like, a bird born in a cage think flying is an illness,
Yes. Yep.
right?
So true.
Alejandro Jodorowsky said that. So
Yep.
yeah, it all stems from childhood rearing.
Yep. Yep. Interestingly, Adventist schools do not teach philosophy. Now
Of
the
course they
colleges,
wouldn't.
yeah, right? The colleges might. I don't know because I didn't go to Adventist college, but certainly Adventist elementary and high school, nope, no philosophy.
Oh, yeah, they're not going to teach anybody how to think. They're not going to do
No,
anything that
no, no,
crazy.
no.
Um,
Mm.
so that brings us to this. So, in what ways? Because I'm really unfamiliar with the Seventh Day Adventist faction, and in what ways did their version of purity culture shape not just your view of sexuality, but your sense of self worth and autonomy? And how did those early messages resurface even after you consciously rejected them?
Yeah. It was by far the biggest influence in my Adventist growing up. Um, and just a little history for people who don't know the Adventist church history, even many Adventists themselves. Like the church was basically founded on fear of sex. Like it had they had a female prophet in Victorian times, which already was fear of sex hysteria, right? The Victorians were putting skirts on pianos because you couldn't look at the legs; they were sexy. Um,
Mhm.
and right, it's just ridiculous. But and so that the prophet Ellen White, her first book was about how to prevent masturbation in children, and uh, John Harvey Kellogg, the Kellogg cereal guy, he was part of the founding of the church, and he never had sex. He was married, never had sex, and he was just obsessed with controlling it. And so that was the founding of the church. And to this day, they are obsessed with controlling sex, not only purity culture, which has been a through line the entire time, but now their biggest thing is biblical sexuality, which of course biblical sexuality was like nutso, but they're not talking about that. They're just using it as an anti-LGBTQ thing. It has to be a man and a woman. So throughout their history, extremely anti-sex, and so their version of purity culture was very draconian, of course. We grew up with a manual for it called Becoming a Woman. There was also one that was written Becoming a Man, but as with so much in purity culture, the boys' book really was never read or even referenced. It was mostly all focused on the girls.
Of
And
course.
yeah, of course. And interestingly enough, the writer of that was the director of the Seventh-day Adventist Medical School for about 30 years. And he actually recommended in that book not only circumcision for boys to prevent masturbation, which that dated all the way back to John Harvey Kellogg, but circumcising girls. Adventists were circumcising girls to prevent masturbation, which is horrifying because that just prevents sexual function, period. And, so it just, the extent that they would go to control female sexuality is frightening. Really, I mean, that is terrifying. So I didn't know all of that at the time, but Adventists also pioneered conversion therapy in the United States. So just you couldn't get away from purity culture influences in it.
They pioneered it.
They did. A guy named Colin Cook in the 1970s, I think he started a I mean, I could go off on that all day, so we won't get distracted. But he was an Adventist pastor, and he called himself ex-gay, and he would supposedly convert LGBTQ members, and the Adventist Church funded him repeatedly, and he kept getting caught having horrible abuse. He was a serial abuser. And his conversion therapy organizations would get shut down. And the Adventist Church would just, invest in his next one and have him come speak at all their colleges and everything. I mean, it went on for a long time. But purity culture affected me very deeply because I was a people pleaser and I was a goody two-shoes. And so I really bought into it in the Adventist funnel because we were so protected from the outside world. I had nothing to counterbalance it. I didn't have movies or even most novels we weren't allowed to read, or television or anything. So the only thing we knew was that stuff, shoved down our throats. And so I literally had a light bulb moment in my late teens where it was like something clicked, and it was like, all of the adults are so terrified of sex. Why? Why is the whole church, everybody so terrified that we're going to find out about sex? So I went down to the public school and I found a really cute basketball player and I found out about sex. And so that was my breaking away from the church point in many ways. But again, I didn't do the work after I left the church and thought I had left purity culture. So I ended up kind of fetishizing the fact that sex had to be bad, because of course that's all I had ever learned in my life. So as an atheist, non-believer, I thought it was cool. And I was just so healed and advanced by making sex like this, as bad as it can get type of transgressive, and that wasn't very healthy. And I'm saying, be as kinky as you want. I'm a big supporter of kinky, whatever, but not when you think that you've healed your purity culture and that's the only way you can do it. That's not very healthy. So, it took me a couple decades to figure out, oh, look at all these just very, very idiotic patterns I'm playing out that really are not my choice. They're what I think I'm doing to spit in the eye of my church that I left 20 years ago. And it's really not helping me much, is it? So it was a whole thing. And I'm sure I still have little residual bits of purity culture somewhere hiding in my psyche. I don't know that you can get rid of it completely. But sorry, that was a long answer. But
Oh, no, not at all. Take your time. It just, I mean, the more I'm listening to you, it's just, it almost seems that, I've always wondered why religious institutions seem to cater to abusers, or more specifically, seem to house abusers, house
yes.
pedophilia.
Yes.
It attracts it. And if, like you said, if a person gets caught, they just move them on to the next parish, the next
Yep.
church, the next temple.
Yep.
And it's almost designed
Mm-hmm.
that way. And how could it not be when the premise is to control and limit the bodily autonomy of
Yes.
women?
Right. Yep. Yeah. Yeah. How could it not? I mean, it just seems like it's such a direct line. Who's not seeing that? Who's not understanding? It's, well, and another thing that always bugs me about, and it's not just the Adventist church, but all churches with their whole moving the perpetrators and forgiving them, is do they not ever listen to psychologists who say that, pedophiles are generally not rehabilitatable. They're not forgivable, and they just move them and everything goes fine from there on, unless they do their work, unless there's severe therapy and serious support and limited contact and, just everything else. Like, pedophiles don't rehabilitate well generally. They reoffend. And like, who in the church is not paying attention to those facts now? It seems, again, like you said, intentional. A moment of silence.
I remember I said to someone, I said, it's 2025 and people are still adhering to these archaic beliefs in these institutions. And it's almost like, seeing someone in 2025 smoking a pack of Cools. Like, do they still make y'all, right?
I know.
Newports, Cools, you can't smoke something else in 2025. That's how I related to church. And so, like, you still believe this?
That is totally a good analogy. Yes. Yeah.
Get a vape or something, but Cools.
Yeah. It's gobsmacking. It really is.
Yes, it is. Now, so listening to you, speaking about purity culture within the Seventh-day Adventist Church, it seems like it was more about control than faith, at least the way that I'm hearing it. And if so, like,
Yes.
how did that agenda manifest in your personal development and relationships, right? Like,
Yeah.
when you were in relationships, let's say during the time you were in the SDA, and even afterwards, and even pushing the envelope more after you decide, okay, you know what? I don't believe in any of this no more. But did some of the trauma still come up when you were attempting to have, and I don't know, right? Like, were you able to have healthy relationships, healthy, even intimate relationships?
Yeah.
Did that affect any of that when you were in it and when you left?
Yeah, that is a huge, and that's a part of the story of my book, because it was such a through line in my entire life. And I really didn't have any relationships while I was still SDA, boyfriends or anything. I literally, that basketball player that I went and was just like, okay, I'm gonna have sex with him, I'd probably kissed 3 people once. I mean, it was like I just went for the whole thing. And then from then on, I basically left the church, and it ended up, so the control, you're right, it was more about control, because everything in the Adventist church is about control. They control what you eat, they control what you look like, and just etc. So the sex was no different, and it made me, of course, an enormous people pleaser, and a kind of type A, like have to do everything, a perfectionist. And I transferred that over into sex as well. And of course we had no sex ed. So I didn't know that I was entitled to say no halfway through an interaction, or I didn't know that I was able to ask for pleasure on my own behalf. Like I didn't know any of that. And 18, 19, 20-year-old boys are not necessarily going to tell you either of those things. Like that I was getting my sex ed from 18, 19-year-old, 20-year-old boys who are not going to say like, oh, you have the option to say no, oh, you have the option to ask for pleasure, because it works out really well for them if you don't know those things. But and then I ended up getting in I kind of neatly divide at this point my adult life into a series of 3 10-year relationships, basically from 20 to 30, 30 to 40, and 40 to 50. And 2 of the 3 were extremely narcissistic abuse, older men situations where I didn't have any autonomy, sexual, personal, anything. Sandwiched in between those 2, I did have what I think I would call a fairly healthy, giving kind of 2-way relationship. But I hadn't done the work. I hadn't healed, and so I ended up making that relationship, taking any little tiny thing that he would say and obeying it, and then resenting him because I was obeying him. He wasn't asking for that, but I was set up that way. That was the only way I knew how to behave, and so I went back for more of the, so then I went into that 3rd relationship, which was the worst of all of them. It was the most narcissistic, abusive, controlling, where I was just basically, at the end, I referred to myself as his service animal. And
wow.
it was, just, and so since then, it's been almost 3-4 years, something like that. I have not trusted myself to get into another relationship. I don't know if I don't know quite what a healthy relationship will look like for me yet. So for now, I'm very happy just healing. But it's a purity culture does some work on your head when I'm sure for everyone, but particularly for women.
And you spoke about narcissism.
Yeah.
It seems like religion breeds narcissism.
Yes.
It's like
I
it's
think
a part of its DNA.
Yeah. Well, like the Old Testament God is a freaking narcissist. He's the most abusive, narcissistic thing ever, and so I think not only does religion breed narcissists, but it breeds women in particular to be susceptible to narcissists, because that's what we're comfortable with, sort of having gone through it. The church is kind of narcissistic in the, truly.
Yeah, narcissistic, and just pedophilia,
Yeah.
women abuse.
Yeah.
When we, even look at I don't even like talking even about the Bible because it means nothing to me, but
Right.
something to so many
You and me
people.
both.
Like, yeah, but even in there, it's kind of like, we see, this spiritual abuser literally tell people, like, hey, go into this land and kill all the men, women, and children, but keep the young girls for yourself.
Right.
It
Right.
literally says that in the book.
Yep.
Keep the young girls.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we talk about even Joseph and Mary. I mean, some rabbis say Mary was like 12.
Right. Exactly.
12 years old.
It's, yeah, I know. And just, like the marrying sisters and just, just like when it always cracks me up because the Adventists like, we need to return to biblical sexuality. And I'm like, do you know how gross that is? How foul biblical sexuality was? Like, who's thinking that's a good idea?
Yeah, they want to bring back the Handmaid's Tale, the Atwoodian type of sexual abuse, right?
Yep. Yeah.
I don't know why. Wow. I mean, at this point, I think that religion, the belief in it, I think it's to the point where some people just can't even help it because I think it's epigenetic at this point. What I mean? It doesn't change a person's DNA, but it does change the way the DNA expresses itself. And I think it's generationally epigenetic at this point. Yeah, it's literally in people.
I really think you're absolutely right. And particularly in those high control religions, because they just have no outer influence. So that DNA is just being concentrated, like just, they don't know anything else. No generation is learning beyond the next one. So it's just distilling more and more. And you're right.
Yeah, it's deplorable.
Yes, indeed.
Being in the SDA, like, how did its teachings around like obedience, like conflict with your inner voice as like a young person, and what did it feel like to start trusting that inner voice again after years of spiritual conditioning, right? Because I can just imagine, like, I put it myself, and I got thrown out of so many children's Sunday schools because, it was something in me that was like, this is weird, right? Like, this is really weird, And so I always had that, because children are natural scientists.
Yes.
Right? What's the one word that a child has that gets on us as parents' nerves all the time? Why? Why? So it's innate in us to ask questions as a child, but religion robs us of that inquisitiveness of a child, right? And so did you ever think, even when you were brought up into that, like, did that inner child ever say to you, this is crazy? But then what kind of hampered that inquisitiveness, right? And when did you get that inner voice back? If it was delineated from your mind, what did it feel like when you got it back? So it's kind of like a two-part question, right? Did you ever have that inner voice, and then just the authority, you were just like, okay, it's, the authority, my parents, whatever, like that. Okay, this is something, it's true. They say it's true. Let me just go and do it. Like, how did that work out for you?
Yeah, the super, again, a huge influence, because not only was the church a super high authority, but my family also was. My mother was very domineering and ruled us with an iron fist. And I was the rebel kid. I fought back, not so much in church and school. I was always pretty much a goody two shoes there, but in family, I fought back quite a bit. And, my mother was a big James Dobson fan. So, break the will of the child. And so, I would get beaten and I would get, screamed at and just punished until my will was broken. And so I think around 12 or so, I just gave up kind of. I was like, all right, I'm not going to fight anymore. It never does me any good. And at that point, I was the bad child because I was so unruly. And then in high school, I remember making one attempt in religion class, which of course was just Bible and Seventh-day Adventist. It had nothing to do with any other religion, but I wrote a paper asking, does the end justify the means, talking about the Esther story where her husband basically prostituted her to the king and she like forced her into his harem, and then the king fell in love with her and she saved the Jewish people, and wasn't that wonderful? And so I said, oh, okay, so are we justifying that prostitution occasionally is okay? And oh my God, you would think I had literally, killed Jesus. So I got hauled into the principal's office, and I had to have one-on-one whatevers with the religion teacher. And basically they wouldn't answer my question. They would just tell me not to ask questions, that, you're sowing doubt in your own mind. Doubt comes from the devil. You don't ask questions like this, just on and on and on and on. And that was another moment where I was just like, this is all bullshit. This is just complete bullshit. But at that point, I was close enough to a foot out the door that I was like, okay, I'm just going to play along, because arguing with these fools doesn't do me any good at all. So I was just like, fine, whatever. Okay. And, I was a goody two shoes for the next 18 months or however, until I graduated and could get the hell out. But, so then I went to a non-Adventist college, and that was when I really learned that voice was there and that people valued it. That was what just killed me. Now, I had always known that sort of in there was that voice, but no one had ever valued it. It was bad. And I just thought, well, I'm bad by association. And the fact that there were whole classes on critical thinking just blew my fucking mind,
Imagine that. Imagine that.
So that was it just blew the doors off, kind of thing. And but I still struggle with putting that in action. I still have to gird my loins to actually speak my mind, because I just automatically want to respect anybody as the authority and not myself, because it was just so ingrained. So it's still work that I have to do of you deserve to take up space. You deserve to have an opinion. You deserve to ask this question. You deserve to say, no, you're wrong, So it's, that's another part that's really, really hard to just rip out of your psyche, because it's so deeply buried.
And that's why I look at indoctrinating children as a cowardly act.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Because they don't have self-defense.
That's it.
You're a child.
Yeah.
Right? Now, of course, to raise a child in a secular environment, let's say when they're to the age of 18, and then let's say you try to introduce religion. Well, they know that wouldn't work, because by that time they're like, oh no, that's bullshit.
Right.
I'm not believing that. So they got to get them at the time that they have a pacifier in their mouth and a rattle in their hand.
Yep.
And that's
it's
cowardly.
Yep. I love that. I've never heard anyone refer to it that way. That's exactly what it is. It's cowardly and it's abusive.
It is. I don't even think children should be exposed to religion probably until about 18.
Yeah.
To be honest.
Yeah. I agree.
Because it just, to me, it just serves no purpose. There's too much wrong with it. I believe we have enough organic problems,
yeah,
as it is, to not add a religion into the mix. I mean,
Precisely.
we got too many problems, right? We
Yeah.
have sexism, racism, misogyny,
Right.
xenophobia,
Yeah.
world hunger, what
Yep.
capitalism, right? Like
Climate change. Yeah. Right.
climate change, right?
Mhm.
And then adding religion for what?
Yeah. Yeah. No,
Yeah,
it's
maybe one day.
useless. Yeah.
It is. Um, so I've talked to quite a few people like over the years, survivors of religious trauma, and
Yeah.
there's a consensus, right? They describe a particular moment when, uh, like, let's say, the inherited narratives about sin, shame, and purity culture start to crack visibly.
Yes.
What was your moment of holy disobedience, right? Like, what was your aha moment? And how did that shape your understanding? Like, and I know you said when you went into a non-Adventist college, that's when things started to change. But was there, like, could you pinpoint like a specific uh, incident where it was like, oh, heck no, I'm done with this, right? Like, like, did you have an aha um, moment? Because I had mine when I was very, very young. Uh, but yeah, well, how did that pan out with you?
Ooh, I wish I'd had mine very, very young. Yeah, I don't remember like an incident, but it was that gradual realization that suddenly just clicked somehow of how much fear was in the adults surrounding us, teenagers. And um it was I focused on the purity culture part of it and sex, but it was just absorbing, like realizing that I was so freaking sick of having to have worship and, chapel and church and everything, and actually counting, like, they are shoving religion down my throat like every 6 to 12 hours. Our school would start with chapel every single morning. Then school had 1 hour of religion, which was just Adventist stuff. And then we had weeks of prayer where it was just a whole week of school days with just Bible and prayer and whatever. And then, of course, we went to church every Saturday. If you were sick, if you were whatever, it didn't matter. You went to church. And then we had family worship every single night. And it was I just started in that senior year when I was writing the essay about Esther, and when I was like targeting the basketball player to sleep with. I also was just it was all coalescing of like, they are terrified. Everyone is terrified. They're so scared that they have to shove this religion down our throat multiple times every single day. And they have to keep us away from anything that's normal because they're scared we're going to learn something. We're going to experience something like, this is wrong. This is fucking wrong. And like, I'm done. This is not a system I want anything to do with. So it wasn't an incident. It was a realization of just, wow, they're so scared that we're going to find out that this is not right, that they're paralyzed practically. And so then I was like, psh, nope.
That hmm, you know, because we're in a modern era, um, what seems to like happen is that when we watch TV and we see shows about cults,
Mhm.
and generally it's like something out of the Druids, right? The
Right.
black cloak and hood, and
Yeah.
gathering around a ring of fire and stuff like that.
Right. Right.
Um, but I wish people would realize that uh, the only difference between a cult and a religion is that a religion is a cult that won the popularity contest.
Totally. Yep.
That's what it is. Because remember
Yep.
when Mormonism at one
Yeah.
time was referred as a cult. Now it's mainstream. Scientology.
Yep.
And then when all the celebrities started going on board, oh, that's not a cult, that's an actual thing.
Right.
They're all cults.
They are.
And whether they wear a suit or if some churches want to appeal to a younger crowd and wear skinny jeans with Jordans on their feet,
Right.
it's still a cult.
Still a cult. Yep.
Still a cult.
Cult. Yep. Absolutely.
Celestial Davenport said, they said we would praise and worship for eternity in heaven. That sounds like sheer torture.
Doesn't it?
Who wants to do that all day?
And who
every
wants
day?
to worship a God that demands that he be worshipped all the time? I mean, again, like, talk about a narcissist. The best thing in life is you're going to worship me forever. Ugh.
It reminds me what Nietzsche said. He said, in heaven, all of the interesting people are missing.
That's right.
That's what he said, right? You know, and my mother, when I was younger, she would always say, boy, you're gonna go to hell on a greasy sliding board. And I'm like, as fast as I can get there.
Exactly.
I don't want to be in heaven with these people.
No kidding.
If hell is all about the free thinkers and the secularists and the atheists and the philosophers, and I'll dine in hell every day.
Yep.
Because those are my people.
Yes. We're going to have fun.
Yes, we are. Yes, we are. As fast as I can get there.
Yep.
And so this brings us, I want to ask you this question. This brings us to this. Like after everything, the breaking, the healing, the holy disobedience, what does faith, if anything, mean to you now? Right? Would do you consider yourself spiritual, or you're an atheist, agnostic? Like what does faith mean to you, and where do you fit? If you could, put a term. I know some people don't like labels, which has always been very problematic for me, because words are labels.
Right.
Yep. When we use language is a label.
Yep.
Right. And I just think a lot of times people don't like to use certain terminologies because they're still attempting to appease the agreeableness in other people. They haven't made it to that stage. They haven't evolved to that stage where they're like, I'm going to walk in full authenticity, unapologetically. Yeah. So a lot of times I know atheists that I know one-on-one are sheer atheists. Yeah. But if someone asks them, do they believe in God? They'll say, I'm kind of non-religious, I'm kind of spiritual. And I'm like, I know you.
And I call bullshit.
I call bullshit. Right? So, like what is your thoughts on faith, and where do you land?
It gives me a big giggle because the church killed faith for me, by being so high control and so having so many rules about absolutely everything. I don't think I ever once in the church felt like a true faith, belief in Jesus, personal religious connection type of thing. They killed it. So their fault. But so I am an atheist now. In my advancing years, I have grown a little wistful, just hoping that, there's, nature is so big and so gorgeous and beautiful. And just amazing and full of so many mysteries. I love mystery. So I try to keep open to just, I guess that's spiritual, is just embracing that there's this big, beautiful world and universe that I am just an infinite speck in, and that has so many more mysteries than I will ever know or even know to question, to ask about. And that to me is really is spirituality, I guess. But I certainly don't have any traditional faith or traditional spirituality. I love the not knowing and the mystery, and I'm just happy with that.
To be human is enough.
That's it. Exactly. Yes.
Right. I mean, even my logo encompasses the abstract of a hummingbird. When I see a hummingbird and see the magnificence of a hummingbird, to me that's like a spiritual experience. Like, oh my goodness, people are talking about gods. Look at Mother Nature.
That's it. Yeah.
Man, look at
I know.
nature.
What could be more magical than that? A hummingbird in flight, like there is no magic greater than that.
But I think that's what religion does. Religion wants to remove us from nature, it wants to remove us from humanity, because if we pay attention to nature, then that takes away the power of indoctrination.
Yep.
That's the goal, grow through. Wow. And I want to know if you could speak on this real quick. She said, I believe we as good Christian girls are attracted to narcissistic men because on a subconscious level, we recognize that they are like God.
Bingo. Wow. She totally nailed it.
Wow.
That is well said. Perfect.
Walk me through that. Like, is it because it's taught that God is male, and that whole gender bias thing, even, which is very odd, because whatever spirit is, I'm pretty sure it doesn't have a gender. But those little details don't matter. That's too reason. Mental details don't matter. But like, man, like, so you would agree with that, right? Like, they look at men as they're subconsciously as connected to their Heavenly Father. So loving one is loving God, I guess.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. It is so deeply entwined there. It's hard to even explain it, I guess. But there's the super authoritarian thing of God, and that women are supposed to be subservient to that, basically, which is a narcissist will take advantage of that. Gosh, I don't know how to say it any more eloquently than she really did. How to explain it? I know for me, it was just all tied up in obedience, female obedience, and narcissistic abusers. Obviously, they're just so adept at knowing what buttons to push and how to reel you in the beginning, and
wow.
And then you're just so subservient, I think, because of that religious conditioning.
I really take for granted that as a man, that there are things that I will never go through because I'm not a woman, things that I will never understand, like really through an experience type of lens, right? Because I'm a male, I think we talked about that before, like I can go to the gym or I can jog at 12 o'clock midnight if I want, and never have a concern about my safety.
Yeah.
And that right there, right, the safety. Oh, I know
Right.
this man is narcissistic and abusive, but at least he's not going to let anyone else abuse me. The trauma with safety, huh?
Yeah.
You know, wow, this was a riveting conversation, and I didn't know any of this about the Seventh Day Adventist. I'm gonna have to do some reading. This is wow. This is very interesting, problematic.
Problematic. Yes.
Yes, where can people find you, Melissa? Give them your social media handles, website if you have one, your book coming up. Like, where can people find you?
Okay. Yeah, I'll give the whole rundown. First of all, thank you for such a fabulous conversation. Thank you. And I'm gonna come back with my book. So I'm just warning you, I'm gonna be knocking on your door. Okay, let's talk about my book now.
Yes, please do. I would be honored.
It'll be fun. I'll send you an advanced copy, and then we can dish a whole other stuff. But
oh wow, long as you sign it. Sign it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So people can find me. I am the Glory Hole. You have to get that W in there. Otherwise, you're going to go in a direction you really don't want to go. So you got to get
that's something. Oh, I'm glad you said that. Oh my goodness. How did you come up with the play on words of glory hole? Because we know what a glory hole is, but how did you? Please speak on it, because I don't know.
Yes, I can do that one very quickly. I, of course, being a writer, I just love plays on words in general, right? So, to me, it's a metaphor for Christianity or for any, the high control type of religion. But in Christianity, right, you are supposed to extend a very, very fragile, vulnerable part of yourself, your soul, basically, into this mysterious unknown, this religion, this relationship with God, whatever it is they're telling you it's supposed to be. But you just extend your most vulnerable parts out there into that unknown. And you could see God, you could have the best experience ever, or you could be maimed for life and have a really, really awful experience that will leave you scarred and deformed.
I love that comparison. Because you're just sticking it in a hole and hoping that God and all the other members of the church are going to have your best interest at heart. So you just stick it in a hole.
Exactly.
And you find out.
Yep. I mean, when I first found out what a real glory hole was, I was just, all I could think of is what could go wrong? Like, oh my God, so it's now my metaphor for Christianity.
I love it. For those who know me, I'm Robert Affinis. You can go to my website at robertaffinis.com. It's Robert Affinis at TikTok and Instagram as well. It was a pleasure having Melissa with me. And thank you as well, because even though, we've exchanged messages, liked each other's content online, there's still always a type of apprehension, right? Because you really never really know people. And I just want to thank you for trusting me that I would provide a safe space for you. So I appreciate that.
Totally. This has been wonderful.
Absolutely. And yes, when that book comes out, we got to do this again.
We're going to do it again.
Absolutely. And thank you for everyone joining in. I'll also be posting clips of our conversation too, also on Instagram and TikTok.
Yay.
And of course, I'll be tagging you as well,
Okay.
Melissa. So yeah, this was a great conversation.
Awesome.
And thanks for everyone tuning in. And
Thank you to everybody.
and have a real drink after you come from the doctor's office.
Yes.
That's all. No. Thank you all. And yeah, we'll be and so hang on tight just for about 2 minutes, Melissa. And we'll talk just for a little bit after everything. And so thank you everyone
All right.
for joining in, and I'll be talking to all of you soon.